Hi, welcome back to Celebrating Culture. We're here today at the Brick Oven Cafe in Kenner, Louisiana, and I'm with Michela Musolino. Michela is a Sicilian songstress, and you've traveled the world, really, Italy, America, all over the place. Your knowledge of Sicilian music history is just overwhelming to me.
Thanks for having me. Thanks. You know, anytime I get a chance to talk about Sicilian music, I'm there. I'm very happy to do it.
I think you were saying we could go back to about 470 BC.
Yes. There is what we call, we would say the filo conduttore, or the continuing line that shows that Sicily always had a unique body of music. So the first song that was documented in Sicily, it was the first Pythian ode, and it was written by Pindar in 470 BC. It was written in honor of Hiron, who is the tyrant of Syracuse, and it was a victory ode. It was a composition that was meant to be sung and danced in honor of the victories that they had over invaders coming into Sicily.
Sicily, when you tour it in Agrigento, the temples there go back to this era.
The temples, if you notice, are typically built with the backdrop of the stage being the sea. We look at that and we say, well, ancient people love beauty, but there was a darker reason for that. They were always worried about invasions. So even in their moments of recreation, they had to still think about protecting themselves, and they had to still be vigilant. So that's why they would put their theaters so that they could always see and watch the coast to make sure that they weren't being invaded. They could never let down their guards and just enjoy something.
Sicily becomes a fishing place. They're also dealing with pirates.
Yes. Sicily, because it's a strategic location in the Mediterranean, it's centrally located, it's always been abundant with resources. So it was a great destination for pirates since antiquity.
New Orleans has a large Ustican population, and I understand that in 1762, a whole city of Ustica was taken one night.
In fact, they were moved there from the island of Lipari. I believe they were moved there to protect them, but they were kidnapped anyway, and they were held ransom for a number of years.
You had a relative.
Yes.
That was actually part of this.
My grandfather came from a town called Borgetto in the Provincia di Palermo, and he came from a family of merchants. It was a situation where the merchant was going on a voyage, and his son was an adolescent, and he thought it'd be wonderful to start the son on this life and acquaint him with the sea. So he took his son with him, but their ships were captured, and he and his son were held for ransom, and the ransom note was sent to his wife, and she was given a choice. You could have your husband, or you could have your son, but you can't have both. So she made the choice to have her son returned to her because she felt, well, my husband's an adult, he can handle himself. My son is young, he needs to have his life ahead of him. And the story is that he came back and he was never right. We would consider it to like what they call the post-traumatic stress disorder. I can't imagine how anyone in Sicily survived that.
I was reading from the U.S. War Department, and they talk about a man in Catania running into town demanding the governor do something because his wife and son were kidnapped.
In the song that I sing, you can hear the voices of the sailors at night crying out because they're being led away in chains.
So by 1804, Sicily's already at war with Libya and Tunisia. We call it the Barbary Coast, but those are the four countries: Algiers, Morocco. Those four countries are the Barbary Coast.
Tunisia and Libya, yeah.
And then the United States gets involved because the United States has sailors starting to be captured when they're in the Mediterranean.
Yep.
So Thomas Jefferson gets into this war.
The Kingdom of the Two Sicilies was a strong naval power. So we asked them for military support, and they let us use their ports. They let us use Palermo and Syracuse. The story where we're going, we're going to wind up in Catania because Catania was used as a port for recreation. So they would have dances, they would have concerts, they would have different performances all around music. So when Thomas Jefferson wanted to establish the Marine Band, he really believed that the musicians from Italy were more refined. It was better music. He had had an Italian violin teacher. He'd spent some time actually in northern Italy years prior, and he was acquainted with Italian-style music. So when Thomas Jefferson was looking for musicians, he sent John Hall to Catania, and he found this band. It was the Carusi Band, and he paid the musicians and their families, their wives, to come to the U.S. to be part of the Marine Band, but they had to be enlisted. So these were not just musicians, they were actually enlisted as soldiers. It was a little bit of a surprise for them because they saw some action before they got to the U.S. From that original group of Sicilians from Catania, one of those musicians was a 12-year-old boy. He'd come with his father, and the young man's name was Venerando Pulizzi, and he stayed in the band for 22 years, and he eventually rose up to the ranks of the director of the Marine Band. But that triggered this Italian invasion of musicians, because eventually we would have 4 directors of the Marine Band, including Venerando Pulizzi.
We actually were able to interview the director of the Marine Band here in New Orleans. I'm here with Master Sergeant Brad Rehrig, and Brad is the director of the Marine Band, Reserve Band in New Orleans. And what's great about them is they're actually active duty Marines, so they could be called to action. They're also great musicians. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
America's first ally is Sicily. That goes back to the Barbary Coast Wars, and I believe like 19 Sicilians come back to America?
One of them was a very young man that ended up being the leader, Pulizzi, and he was only 12 years old when he was enlisted into the Marine Band. From what I see in my experience at 12 years old, I don't think there's a way anybody could make it in the Marine Band or the Marine Corps at that age. Back in the 1800s, he was 12. He became a Fife major about 10 years later, and then eventually was actually promoted and asked to be the leader of the Marine Band.
How many years did he spend?
He had 47 years of service. I'm currently at 21 years of service, so I'm not even halfway to his amount of service, which is very intriguing to me. That's a lot for your body to go through, I can tell you that. In addition to being a musician, when he was done being the leader of the Marine Band, he took maybe a couple months off and decided he loved the Marine Corps and I'm going to join. Between his service as a regular Marine and a musician, it all equaled 47 years.
And there was another gentleman, Salvatore Catalano, who I think partnered with Decatur, where they sailed the ship into Tripoli.
That is correct.
So the Sicilians were working hand in hand, not only to provide musicians, but also soldiers.
Decatur, as we know, Decatur Street in New Orleans, he sailed into Tripoli to retake and destroy the Philadelphia, which was a warship by America that was taken and captured by the pirates. He came up with the plan and sailed in there, and he took it out of enemy hands. Decatur was the first international war hero in America.
The opening of the hymn, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli.
Those lines go way back in our history. It goes to the Battle of Chapultepec, where we get the blood stripe, and the NCOs, E4 and above, and all of our Marine officers wear a red stripe on our blue trousers that symbolizes the blood shed at the Battle of Chapultepec.
And that was the Mexican-American War.
Yes. Just with those 2 lines, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli, it shows that in just 2 short sentences, we have covered almost half of the world, and we travel anywhere. That's the way I interpret that.
Michela, you're performing across the country now, California, Florida, the Carolinas. If someone wants to reach you to perform at their event or get your music, how do they do that?
They would go to my website, michelamusolino.com.
Michela, I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And I want to thank everyone at Brick Oven Cafe for letting us use their facility here. Great pizzas, great pastas. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more of Celebrating Culture.